Good morning, Andrew Meet Rich here. Four masked robbers on scooters racing out of the Louvre with Empress Eugenie's diamond tiaras stuffed in their pockets. Prince Andrew back in the spotlight over Epstein victim memoirs, and Russian hackers accused of breaching Britain's Ministry of Defense. Welcome to Monday, October 20th, 2025. Today we're diving deep into a daring heist in France, cyber attacks on military infrastructure, Trump and Putin negotiations involving Ukraine, and a massive internet blackout that paralyzed Britain. Let's break it all down, starting with what's happening across the channel, because this one is absolutely unbelievable. Now, before we go any further, let me remind you who I am and why I'm doing this. I spent years working inside a major, well-known media organization. I watched stories get shaped, twisted, edited to fit whatever narrative the powers above wanted you to believe. I got tired of it, so I left. Now I work independently, I answer to no one, and I bring you the stories that matter, the way they actually happened. No spin, no agenda, just the truth. If you appreciate that kind of journalism, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. And if you really want to support independent voices like mine, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It keeps this operation running, and it keeps me free to tell you what the mainstream won't. All right? Let's get into it. So picture this. Sunday morning in Paris. The Louvre, one of the most famous museums on the planet. Four individuals used an extendable ladder from a mobile crane to climb up to a balcony and break into the legendary Galerie d'Apollon. Once inside, they cut through glass display cases with power tools and made off with 8 priceless 19th century jewels that once belonged to French Empress Eugenie and various queens of France. We're talking tiaras, necklaces, brooches, all encrusted with thousands of diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, the kind of pieces you see in history books. 2 items, including Eugenie's crown, were dropped during their escape on scooters and later recovered near the museum. But the rest? Gone. Now here's where it gets even more ridiculous. Investigators discovered that a third of the gallery wasn't even covered by security cameras. And get this, the local alarm system in that hall had recently broken down. So you've got some of the most valuable artifacts in Europe sitting in a room with no working alarm and partial camera coverage. Genius. Authorities are now searching for 4 suspects based on footage from cameras along their escape route. The museum is closed. French officials are calling this theft an attack on the nation's history. Experts warn that the stolen jewels will likely be dismantled, the metal melted down, the stones recut, all to erase any trace of the crime. Robbing the Louvre with a ladder. Honestly, it's almost poetic. I'm waiting for Guy Ritchie to make a remake of some classic heist film based on this. It's brazen, it's bold, and it exposed just how vulnerable even the most iconic institutions can be when security gets complacent. But let's shift gears now and talk about Prince Andrew, because the British press just won't let this story die. And honestly, can you blame them? New details published in the posthumous memoirs of Virginia Giuffre have once again intensified pressure on Prince Andrew and the royal family, despite his stepping back from all titles and honorary roles. The book repeats allegations that Giuffre was sexually exploited by Jeffrey Epstein and his high-profile associates, including Andrew. The prince continues to deny all accusations. Meanwhile, London police are investigating reports that in 2011, Andrew attempted to obtain Giuffre's personal information through security personnel. Against this backdrop, Member of Parliament Rachel Maskell from York has called for a change in the law that would allow the monarch to strip aristocrats of their titles without parliamentary approval. Although Andrew's renunciation of all royal duties was officially voluntary, sources inside the palace acknowledged that the publication of these memoirs could bring new waves of pain to the royal family, which is already trying to limit press attention on this matter. That's according to the BBC today. The Guardian, however, takes a harsher tone, suggesting that Andrew, who was recently stripped of all his titles and honours, has smeared the entire monarchy on his way out, as if the monarchy wasn't already entangled in controversy before this. Meanwhile, the Daily Telegraph published a cartoon showing Chancellor Rachel Reeves telling Prince Andrew, "I want you to announce the budget. You're the only person in the country less popular than me." Ouch. Now let's talk about Russian hackers. They're being accused of stealing hundreds of classified documents from Britain's Ministry of Defense. These documents contained information about 8 Royal Air Force and Royal Navy bases, as well as personal data on employees, including names, contact details, and vehicle registration numbers. The files were published on the dark web following a breach of contractor DGOP, which handled construction and maintenance work for military sites. The cyber attack, which involved ransomware, began on September 23, 2025. Just a reminder, ransomware typically infiltrates systems through compromised websites, often adult content sites. Among the sites mentioned in the leaked documents are RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, which houses American F-35 fighter jets, as well as RAF Portreath and RAF Predonac. The Ministry of Defense confirmed it has launched an investigation and stated it is taking measures to protect national interests, though it refused to disclose any details. But here's the kicker. They found the hackers in Russia. Russian hackers everywhere. It's almost like a reflex at this point, isn't it? Anything goes wrong, point east and blame Moscow. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the certainty with which these accusations fly around is remarkable, especially when details remain conveniently classified. Speaking of security concerns, British military personnel and Ministry of Defence police will now be granted the authority to shoot down drones that threaten the security of military bases. Defence Secretary John Healey announced these measures on October 20th, emphasising the need for more rapid responses to incidents following a series of reports about unidentified drones near bases at Lakenheath, Mildenhall and Feltwell, all of which are used by the US Air Force. The new powers, referred to as a kinetic option, allow for the destruction of aircraft that pose a threat, whereas previously only interference with their navigation systems was permitted. Although this measure currently applies only to military sites, authorities have not ruled out expanding it to civilian infrastructure, including civilian airports. Against the backdrop of ongoing incidents in Europe involving alleged Russian drones, EU countries are discussing the creation of a multi-layer drone shield for rapid detection and neutralization of flying objects. As far as we can gather from previous articles in the British press, British personnel will be trained to shoot down drones by military specialists from Ukraine who already have experience in this area. All right, let's take a quick breather here. If you're finding this information valuable, do me a favor and smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me which story shocked you the most today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This is the kind of reporting you won't get anywhere else. Now back to the global chessboard. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the United States to supply Kyiv with an additional 25 Patriot air defense systems and to use frozen Russian assets to fund their purchase. He noted that existing systems are insufficient to protect cities and energy infrastructure from intensified Russian attacks. His statement came after a sharp deterioration in relations with Washington. Donald Trump has once again taken a position that aligns closely with Moscow's interests, suggesting Ukraine should accept things as they are, effectively giving up parts of its territory. That's what the BBC is reporting today. According to media sources, the meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the White House was tense, marked by shouting and threats directed at Zelensky. He was told that Russia would destroy Ukraine if it refused peace on Putin's terms. Trump confirmed an invitation for Putin to attend a summit in Budapest and even suggested Zelensky might participate. But the Ukrainian leader criticized the choice of venue, calling Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán someone who blocks Ukraine at every turn within the European Union. EU officials emphasized that Putin's visit to Europe would only be acceptable for signing an unconditional ceasefire. In the end, Zelensky returned from Washington empty-handed, which is exactly what the Times is mocking today with a cartoon. It satirizes his nightly addresses to citizens. "Good evening, fellow citizens. I went to Washington and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." That's literally what the Times printed today. Publications in the Western press claim that Vladimir Putin has once again managed to influence US President Donald Trump, strengthening his sway over Trump's position on Ukraine. According to sources, on the eve of Trump's meeting with Zelensky at the White House, the Russian leader held a 2-hour phone conversation with Trump, after which Washington's rhetoric sharply shifted toward Moscow's positions. During negotiations with Zelensky, Trump reportedly refused to promise Kyiv Tomahawk missiles and suggested Ukraine accept Putin's conditions, including the transfer of Donbas and Crimea. A cartoon in the Times brilliantly illustrates what happened during Putin and Trump's conversation. A figure resembling Lavrov stands next to a figure resembling Putin. The dialogue goes like this: "I just talked to Trump for 2 hours. And what did he say? He said hello." Brilliant cartoon, in my opinion. But now let's turn to normal British problems. On the morning of October 20th, today, users across Britain, maybe even around the world, encountered a massive internet outage. Dozens of popular websites and apps stopped working, including Amazon, Snapchat, Canva, Duolingo, Roblox, HMRC, and Vodafone. According to Down Detector, the cause was a malfunction in Amazon Web Services infrastructure, which triggered errors and delays across countless services that rely on this platform. The outage began around 8 a.m. UK time, when AWS reported elevated error rates and problems with customer support. The company assured users that engineers were working to fix the issues and determine the cause. This time, at least, they didn't blame Russian hackers. A study by the Centre for Economics and Business Research revealed that by 2050, the United Kingdom will drop to 46th place globally in GDP per capita, whereas between 1998 and 2003, it ranked 25th. According to forecasts, Lithuania will overtake Britain by 2030. The Czech Republic and Saudi Arabia will surpass it in 2031, Poland in 2034, and by 2043, even Turkey and Latvia will exceed the UK in living standards. Experts cite weak productivity, high household debt, and declining investment as the main causes. Meanwhile, Canada and France are also seeing their positions worsen. In the book Prosperity True, released ahead of the British budget, authors propose a package of 24 measures, from transitioning to a unified tax system to reducing business regulations, which, according to their calculations, could boost GDP per capita by 30%. And return Great Britain to the top 20 wealthiest nations in the world. 30-year-old James Moody from Scunthorpe flew to Italy because it turned out to be cheaper than a day trip to London. 12 hours before departure, he bought a Ryanair ticket from Stansted to Bergamo for £30 and spent an entire day in Milan, drinking coffee, strolling around, eating pasta at a cafe, and buying souvenirs. Despite expenses for parking, £50, and fuel, £30, his one-day trip cost significantly less than a train ticket to London, which costs at least £100. James called the situation, where flying to another country is cheaper than travelling within Britain, simply illogical, but admitted he was happy to see new places at a low price. Well, if all the borders were open, it would be even better. Energy companies Octopus Energy and OVO Energy are giving away free electric blankets to vulnerable customers struggling to pay heating bills this winter. The initiatives target elderly people, individuals with disabilities, and patients sensitive to cold. Electric blankets consume only 2 to 4 pence per hour and can reduce bills by £300 a year compared to traditional heating. Octopus has allocated 10,000 blankets as part of its Assist program. Applications are reviewed manually and priority goes to those most in need. OVO has launched a £56 million assistance program, also offering thermal throws and energy-efficient services. Applications are accepted through the website by providing an account number and postal code. Both companies encourage those who can afford to buy a blanket on their own to leave the free kits for customers facing financial hardship. They also remind users about the importance of following safe usage guidelines for such devices. The companies, unfortunately, aren't thinking about cutting electricity bills or reducing rates. Instead, they're spending their profits on 10,000 blankets. Interesting priorities. The UK government has officially refused to hold a referendum on the introduction of digital identification. The reason was a petition that gathered more than 14,500 signatures. This detail surprised me today in the press. The petition demanded a vote on Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's initiative to create a national digital ID system that would be mandatory for all employed individuals in the country. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology confirmed that a referendum will not be held. What surprised me about this information is the focus on such a small number, 14,500 signatures. I became curious why the paper was covering a duplicate petition that collected only 14,500 signatures, while the main petition gathered nearly 3 million signatures against the introduction of ID. Naturally, I checked what happened with the original petition, and there it turns out, look, there's also a refusal. The UK government confirmed it plans to introduce a national digital identification system despite nearly 3 million signatures on a petition opposing it. In a response published on October 2nd, look, the response was published on the official website of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, which stated that the new digital ID will help combat illegal migration, simplify access to government services, and make the identification system more secure. Physical identity cards will not be introduced. Digital identity will be stored electronically and provided free of charge to all citizens and legal residents over 16 years old. However, its use will become mandatory for certain procedures, such as verifying the right to work. The government emphasized that digital ID usage will not be compulsory for everyone. Police will not be able to demand it during routine checks, and protecting personal data will be a key priority. Public consultations and the development of legislation to regulate the new system are planned in the near future. No mention of Russian hackers who could potentially breach all of this. But in any case, no matter how hard you try to sign a petition and send it to Parliament, here's the official response. Tough luck. Greater Manchester Police Sergeant Tom Hindle received the King's Commendation for bravery after engaging in a confrontation with a knife-wielding man who attacked his colleague, Mark Foster, in the Walkden area in June 2023. I told you about this case before. The attacker, Jacob Brown, wounded both sergeants before being subdued with a taser deployed by Police Constable Marcus Wolstenholme. Hindle sustained stab wounds to the neck and torso. Foster suffered cuts, but thanks to their actions, no civilians were harmed. All three officers had previously been recognized with multiple bravery awards, and Brown was placed in a psychiatric hospital under an indefinite court order in 2024. I didn't risk uploading the video of this incident to YouTube, so you can watch it on our Telegram channel. The British press continues to sharply criticize Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform UK party, for contradictory statements about Russia. They're calling his position hypocritical and demonstrating complete unsuitability for leading the country. The leader of Reform UK, who aspires to become Prime Minister, attempted to present himself as tough on Vladimir Putin, stating he would be ready to give orders to shoot down Russian aircraft in case of NATO airspace violations. He also supports transferring frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. However, articles remind readers of his previous pro-Russian statements, accusations against the EU and NATO for provoking the war, as well as praise for Putin as an effective leader and appearances on Russia Today television. The author of today's piece in the iNewspaper points out that throughout his political career, Farage has repeatedly echoed Kremlin rhetoric, and now, fearing for his political prospects, he's trying to distance himself from previous positions and rewrite his own history. Despite a ceasefire announced a week ago, Israel continues to strike the Gaza Strip, raising doubts about its compliance. Israeli attacks near Al-Zawaidah and in the northern part of the enclave have resulted in the loss of at least 7 Palestinian lives. Dozens more were wounded. The Israel Defense Forces acknowledged airstrikes on Rafah, stating they were a response to shelling from Hamas. However, the movement claims it is observing the ceasefire and is not conducting combat operations in that area. Israel has also suspended humanitarian aid deliveries and blocked the Rafah border crossing, violating ceasefire terms. According to Gaza authorities, since the ceasefire began, around 50 Israeli violations have been recorded, resulting in at least 38 fatalities. Against this backdrop, the U.S. State Department accused Hamas of preparing a massive violation of the ceasefire, which the movement called a lie and cover for Israeli actions. Now, for something interesting. It wasn't just the Louvre that got robbed over the weekend. British specialists are also in the game. At Horncastle in Lincolnshire, criminals used a stolen JCB excavator to rip an ATM out of the wall of a Lloyds bank early Saturday morning. Police received a report about the incident around 3 a.m. and established that the equipment had been stolen nearby. The bank building is seriously damaged, and the criminals escaped, presumably in a second vehicle, a pickup truck. Police cordoned off the area, are conducting forensic investigations, and are asking residents to provide CCTV or dashcam footage. The lead investigator noted that such crimes are very rare for this quiet town, and police have deployed significant resources to find those responsible. And I'm curious how they came up with such a simple idea, to just rip an ATM out of the wall. That must be a meter-thick reinforced concrete wall. Hello, what about a magnet? What magnet? What are you talking about? Well, anyway. Before we wrap up today, let me quickly remind you what we covered. We started with the audacious Louvre heist, 4 thieves on scooters making off with priceless imperial jewels through shockingly poor security. Then we discussed Prince Andrew's ongoing scandal tied to Epstein victim memoirs and calls to reform royal title laws. We examined allegations of Russian hackers breaching Britain's Ministry of Defence and stealing sensitive military data. We looked at new UK powers to shoot down drones near military bases. We talked about Zelensky's tense White House meeting with Trump, who's pushing Ukraine toward territorial concessions favoured by Putin. We covered Britain's massive internet outage caused by Amazon Web Services failures. We reviewed grim economic forecasts showing the UK sliding to 46th place globally in GDP per capita by 2050. We saw how a man flew to Italy cheaper than taking a train to London. We discussed energy companies giving away electric blankets instead of lowering bills. We examined the government's refusal to hold a referendum on mandatory digital ID despite nearly 3 million signatures opposing it. We honored a brave police sergeant who received the King's Commendation for bravery after a knife attack. We analyzed Nigel Farage's contradictory statements on Russia and growing press criticism. We noted Israel's continued strikes on Gaza despite a supposed ceasefire. And finally, we had a good laugh about criminals using a stolen excavator to rip an ATM out of a bank wall in Lincolnshire. So there you have it. Another day, another set of headlines that make you wonder where this world is heading. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything to an independent voice like mine. And if you really want to help keep this operation running strong, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's viewers like you who make this possible. Drop a comment below and tell me which story caught your attention the most today. Was it the Louvre heist, the Trump and Putin phone call, the UK's digital ID push despite public opposition? Let me know. And if you're on Telegram, come find our channel for exclusive videos and additional content you won't see anywhere else. Until next time, this is Andrew Meet Rich. Stay sharp, stay informed, and don't let them feed you the narrative. See you soon.